Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled, "Neighbors broke into my house, trashed everything, stole items worth over $18,000. I ruined their lives." This happened about a year ago and involves my neighbors. I came home from spending a weekend at my girlfriend's to find my condo had been broken into, trashed pretty thoroughly, and about $18,000 worth of camera equipment and electronics stolen. I made a report with the police and they did absolutely nothing. I tried to get in touch with the detective to no avail. Another unit in my condo complex had also been burgled. They took their computer, but more importantly their car keys and car. My keys were also stolen, but I think since my car is a manual, they elected to take the much more boring automatic car my neighbor had. After a day of trying to get the police to take the matter seriously, at around 10 PM that same night, I get a ping. My laptop had been opened and connected to the internet. I look for the location and turns out it is at a hotel about half a mile from my house. So at this point I realize I'm not dealing with criminal masterminds. I write down to the hotel to see if the desk person will tell me which room they are in, since I do have a pretty good idea for where the room is, all except for which floor they are on. They don't, of course, but as I am leaving, I see my neighbor's car just sitting on the street. We call AAA and the police, steal the car back and tow it to a different location somewhere else in the neighborhood. Since the thieves still have the keys, they could easily just come steal it again. My neighbor has resigned to rekeying his car and dealing with that expensive headache, but it is still a win to have the car retrieved. While we were there, I thought it would be a good idea to bring the police with me to the hotel desk person, but without a warrant or backup, they are unwilling to even knock on the door. The next morning, I get up nice and early, call the detective assigned to my case, and he answers. He had just gotten in and my file is on his desk. I tell him what I know and ask if it is a good or bad idea to go to the hotel and wait for them to leave so I can confront them and maybe get some of my stuff back. He says that's a terrible idea, so that is exactly what I do. This forces his hand somewhat and he ends up meeting me at the hotel with his partner. Just as I was introducing myself, 3 young males walk past the lobby, one of which is wearing my backpack. What made matters even worse is that I have seen these dudes before. They live not too far from my house in a shared housing accommodation. I say, "Hey, there goes my backpack," and the detectives detain the young men and find my laptop, my iPad, another laptop, still unknown, and a set of keys. Now, I don't know what probable cause really is, but 3 guys walking out of a hotel room with $3K worth of my stolen goods seems like it should be. But no, they knock on the door but don't enter. Sucks, but I have insurance and that ended up covering it. Now for the revenge part, only one guy was carrying anything stolen, so he faces a pretty massive receiving stolen property charge and pleads out to a year in jail. Not bad, right? Well, in my victim impact statement I talk about how I feel unsafe now, how the insurance company had to pay me out, and I request restitution for the full amount plus the new security system we have installed on our property. The suspect is staring daggers at me. Apparently in the interrogation he was incredibly angry and completely at a loss for how he got caught. I am happy enough to fill in the courtroom with those details and I give an interview to a local newspaper, so whenever anyone googles his fairly distinctive name, all this comes up. I have a protection order against him and he is scheduled to be released soon, but with my new security system I don't think I will be having any problems in the future, and maybe he learned a valuable lesson. Probably not, but the felony on his record should be a nice reminder. Don't break the law, a-hole. And ripe stars, I am wondering, have you ever caught any neighbors that were stealing from you? For me personally, I only remember one neighbor that ever stole from me, and it was around 15 years ago. It was a neighbor boy and we always played with Pokemon cards together, and at one point he stole 3 of my most valuable Pokemon cards. And then when I tried to confront him, his a-hole dad even screamed at me. That dad was absolutely weird and kind of creepy, and all the neighbor kids were sort of afraid of him. And the next one is titled, Woman damages my mom's car and blames my mom. Her corrupt cop boyfriend covers it up and ruins both of their reputations. For some background, I live in a predominantly white suburban town in New Jersey and my family is Asian. Although the town is alright for the most part, it is not really a secret that some of the town's people are pretty racist. One of our neighbors, let's call him Anthony, is a retired police captain from another town, but he is friends with my town's police chief. My mother is a first-generation immigrant, and although she is fluent in English, she still has a pretty thick Asian accent. A couple of years ago, my mom went to visit one of her friends on the other side of town. My mom had parallel parked directly in front of her friend's house, which is at the bottom of a small hill. As she was leaving, a woman driving a Jeep Wrangler with her children was driving down the small hill, but she was still a decent distance back, so my mom pulled out of her spot. The road they were on was really wide, with enough space to fit 5 cars next to one another, and about 40 feet ahead was a stop sign. My mom at this point was already in the middle of the road, fully out of the parking spot, and had gotten about 10 feet when the woman driving the Jeep suddenly came up from behind my mom's car and cut directly in front of her, crossing a double yellow line to do so. Because of the angle she cut my mom off at, the Jeep's rear wheel ended up ripping off my mom's front bumper. My mom naturally immediately stopped and the woman got out of her car after straightening it out on the road. As soon as she stepped out of her car, this woman, we will call her Karen, immediately starts cursing my mom out at the top of her lungs. Karen told my mom to call the police, but my mom told her that her phone had died. My mom's friend and her son, as well as the neighbor, came out of the house after hearing the commotion to see what had happened. The neighbor, an elderly man, asked what happened and Karen yelled, "Are you effing blind? An accident happened. Go call the police. I need to call my boyfriend." The son had taken a law class in school, so he offered to take a bunch of pictures of the scene of the accident and send them to my mom later. This becomes super important later. The neighbor calls the police, but Karen's boyfriend arrives at the scene first. When the cop, let's call him Kenny, finally arrives, he asked my mom what happened. Just as my mom had just started saying her side of the story, the cop says, "Wait a minute," and walks over to the boyfriend. As it turns out, the boyfriend, we will call him Sam, was a cop in the town who was pretty popular with the kids in the middle school, since he would occasionally visit to talk about things like DARE and other things in assemblies. Sam was off duty at the time, so he was able to come over when Karen called him. As soon as Kenny saw his bud Sam, he immediately went to go talk with him rather than with my mom or with Karen. They discussed for a little while and afterwards sent everyone on their way. My mom tried to talk to Kenny before he left, but Kenny just brushed it off and said he got the details he needed and that my mom would be able to get the police report in about a week or 2. When my mom receives the police report, she saw that it said that she pulled out without using her blinkers suddenly and hit Karen's car. On top of that, Karen was expecting for my mom's insurance to pay for the damage done to her rear wheel. My mom went to my neighbor Anthony to ask what she should do about the report since it was clearly wrong. Anthony was furious and told her that she should go to the police station and ask to see the chief. And if they ask why she needs to see him, she should tell them that it is because she wants to file an internal complaint. That day, my mom takes the photograph sent to her by the son and goes to the police station and asks the person working the front desk to see the chief. The cop says that she could not just walk in and ask for the chief, so my mom responds, "Okay, so where should I go to file an internal complaint?" And the cop immediately straightens up and says, "Right here. Come with me." He leads her into the back. The deputy chief steps into the room and started recording the conversation. Since the chief was out, my mom presented all of the evidence to him instead. After presenting the evidence to show that it was in fact Karen that hit her instead of the other way around, my mom also says that she would like to file a corruption complaint against both Kenny and Sam. Kenny clearly did not do his job properly, since he did not properly ask the actual people involved in the accident and did not even note the fact that there were 2 passengers in Karen's car in the report. Even Karen later admitted to an investigator that Kenny never once spoke to her. My mom even threw in the racist card for good measure, saying maybe Kenny wouldn't listen to her and brushed her off because of her thick Asian accent. Sam meanwhile had interfered with the investigation despite not being at the scene of the crime during the time of the accident. The deputy chief says he will start an internal investigation and will see if anything needs to be done. Meanwhile, my mom also filed a claim to her insurance and presented the evidence to them too, and her insurance decides since the accident in their eyes was clearly not her fault. They were not going to pay Karen a penny and that they would contact Karen's insurance to pay my mom instead. A lot of internal bureaucratic investigational bullcrap happens, including interviews with Karen, my mom's friend and the friend's neighbor. About a month passed and an officer comes to our house to tell my mom that Kenny had been punished, but there was not enough evidence to punish Sam and he just wanted to know if there were any other concerns she had. Since Karen seemingly had not done anything to further warrant any action and the damage to the car was paid for, my mom said there was nothing else. This is the fun part. 3 days after the officer came to our door, a letter came in the mail for a court hearing. Turns out Karen decided to file 3 tickets about my mom just one day before the statute of limitations. Apparently in New Jersey, citizens are allowed to file complaints about other citizens breaking the law, a thing that our family had never heard of before until this happened, and because of how late she filed these complaints, by the time we received them in the mail, we could not even counter-complain and the only options were to pay the fine or to go to court. We assumed that Karen learned about being able to file a complaint from Sam because no shit, and that the only reason she was willing to go this far is because she heard my mom had a super thick Asian accent and assumed that my mom wouldn't know what to do about the tickets and would just pay up. What she didn't count on was the fact that my mom is actually really aggressive with an absolutely massive network of people that she knows. Within a day, my mom hired a lawyer to fight the case and they immediately asked to change the court from the small court in our town to one of the large courts a couple of towns away. The logic was that if she fought the case in our town, my mom would be at a disadvantage since her case was essentially going against our town's beloved police force. Just by putting it in a different town, the playing field would be even. Additionally, while my mom worked from home in her own business, Karen had a full-time job in town, so going to court in a different town would be a huge pain in the ass for her. The lawyer had prepared a huge amount of evidence against Karen, so there was no way she was actually going to win the case no matter what. Come the court date, Karen never showed up, so the case was thrown out. That was a pretty nice win, but what came after was even better. Since my mom and sister have a lot of friends in town, the story of Karen and Sam doing this shady BS got out really fast. Soon half the town had heard about it and suddenly Karen and Sam went from 2 favorites in the town because of Sam's reputation to 2 of the most underhanded and nasty people. Sam stopped getting invited to school assemblies and Karen was ostracized in her kids' school PTA. Anthony also ended up talking to the police chief in private, and we found out that although Sam was not officially punished, he was severely reprimanded by the chief. And guys, if you have watched until here and enjoy my content, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments to support me. Thank you so much in advance. Next one, I live in an HOA community. My experience thus far: first, I went to a meeting where a guy wanted a 4-foot fence instead of the standard 3 because his dog kept getting out. After arguing for a bit, he was not so politely told to appeal to the Architectural Review Committee. At the end of the meeting, they asked for volunteers to sit on said ARC. I volunteered, approved his request, and then quit. He has a 4-foot fence. Second, I got a notice that my fence was not within regulations because the peak of the arch was 4 inches too high. I went to a meeting to appeal and with a draft of my new plans. My appeal was shot down, so I revealed my new plans, which included no fence and a 40-foot ham radio tower. HAM radio towers cannot be regulated by HOA. My fence is apparently okay. Third, I got a knock on the door one day from someone soliciting home repairs for my damaged garage door frame. I politely told them no thanks and a few days later got a letter from the HOA. Out of curiosity, I looked up the business and sure enough, one of the board members owned the home repair business. I sent the HOA board a letter of my finding with a copy to my attorney general. Apparently, my garage door frame is also okay. Edit, I also have one I have not got to use yet. When I first moved in, I received a letter from the HOA that all improvements to the property were approved at the time of me moving in. If they ever decide to challenge anything I've done, I will simply say that it was there when I moved in and watch them try to prove that it was not. The sheer pettiness of these HOA communities would just make me crazy. Especially because I could not care less about how my driveway or my garden looks, and I would care even less what my neighbor thinks about that. And the next one. A few years back I lived in some condos as a renter that had a HOA. Each condo had a street-facing door and garage, as well as a door on the inside facing the pool. I am a typical working middle-class guy with a typical family, a wife, some kids and the occasional pet. One of our neighbors was 3 specific minority families that got together and decided to buy this one unit on the end. They all lived there most of the time and often had questionable visitors come by. The president of the HOA for the condos was also the majority owner, and he lived hours away but would come for vacation at his condo during the summer to be by the beach. One night my wife and I had just put the kids to bed and we hear this obnoxiously loud knock on the front door. We have a doorbell, is all I could think, so I walked up to the door and looked through the peephole and recognized the guy, but could tell something was up. My wife freaked and called the cops like right away. I opened the door and the guy started screaming, "You're dealing! I want some! I will pay right now! Hook me up!" He was accusing me of dealing drugs from my house. I explained to him that the family next to us regularly had questionable late night visitors and he should go over there if he was going to make a scene. But no, he insisted he had seen people that could only be drug dealers come in and out of my unit for the past week. My wife heard the conversation and relayed it the cops, who at this point were en route. Frustrated at being yelled at by a drunken idiot this late at night, I told him if he thought he found a drug ring, he should call the cops and not go knocking on doors, putting himself in danger. He took it as a threat and in return started threatening me. I had enough, so I went inside. About the second I got the deadbolt locked, he starts banging again, waking up my sleeping 3- and 1-year-olds. I stepped into my room, grabbed my pump shotgun, told the kids to go to the back of the house and opened the door again with my gun to his face. My wife told me John, a family friend who was also the on-duty night cop, was coming to the house. I told her to advise him of the situation. The drunk HOA president then took my show of arms as confirmation that I was indeed the drug lord he was after and starts to walk off. I let him because I'm not about to walk outside of my house with a loaded gun drawn. He calls the cops and before he gets off the phone, John, our family friend, arrives with lights on and everything. I put my gun down and stepped outside to talk the situation through. The HOA president thought that the cops were there in response to his call because he did not know about my wife calling. He starts yelling at the cop, "This is the drug lord, I caught him red-handed." John cleverly asked him to cross the street for questioning, then placed handcuffs on him for being in public domain while intoxicated. He blew a .12 BAL, which I suppose is blood alcohol content, but correct me if I'm wrong, and got arrested that night. The cops told me that if he was ever a problem again, just to call. The next week we got a letter from his wife, the HOA VP, informing us that we had to move out. I took that to the owner of the unit we were leasing and we threatened to take it to court. I attended the next HOA meeting with the owner with police report in hand and the board unanimously voted to remove the president and VP completely from the HOA and they comped our fees for the next 2 years. It seems like those HOA bullies are strong until you take matters really in your own hands and maybe even go to court. And by the way, if you have watched until here, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments and also like the video if you want to support me. Thank you very much, your support is really appreciated. And the next story, we had this one strange guy in our neighborhood who liked to build strange things in his house. Well, I guess one day he decided to take his hobby outside and build a treehouse in his backyard. Our HOA president was a city councilman at the time and he was not happy in the slightest. This literally turned into a 2-year dispute where the HOA would keep asking him to add safety measures to the structure in hopes that he would eventually give up and dismantle the treehouse. Eventually, the HOA told him that he would have to have the plan signed and stamped by a qualified engineer saying that the structure was safe. At the next meeting, he handed in the blueprints signed and stamped by no other than himself. That was a great meeting. It turns out that he had a PhD in civil engineering and there was only one guy in the room that did not find it funny. I love how the story starts out. We had this one strange guy in the neighborhood and then in the end it turned out that he has a PhD in civil engineering. Once again shows you better not judge people from the outside. And the next one, my mom is an incredible landscape architect who has written 2 books on the subject. We live in a good-sized house in the suburbs. When my parents first moved in, our entire front and backyard was just grass. My mom did not like this, so she spent years outside gardening and developed our yard into something really beautiful and unique. Basically, keep in mind I know nothing about landscape architecture. We have 2 small patches of grass on either side of our driveway, which is surrounded by a multitude of well-maintained bushes and flowers. After my mother had spent years on this project, the HOA sends us a letter about how there is a designated amount of grass that every yard must have. Our yard looked amazing and my mom was clearly distraught, so she ignored the letter. They sent more and more until an HOA representative came out. The person was being a total jerk to my mother and threatening legal action, so my mother heard them out, then calmly responded with, "Thank you for making the trip out here, mister. Something I forget. But before you take legal action, I should have you know, my father-in-law is a lawyer who has been certified to testify before the Supreme Court. This is true. And, between you and me, he does not make a habit of losing cases, especially those as mundane as this." The man was slightly taken aback and stuttered something before my mom added, "I'm a determined woman, and as you can see from my garden, when I start something, I make sure I finish it my way. If you don't stop pestering us, I will see to it that your whole organization is taken down. Get the F off my property and have a good day." Never heard from the HOA again. My daughter has severe asthma. We bought our condo because it was affordable, clean and move-in ready. We were trying to move before our son was born for fear a moldy house made our daughter sick and would do the same to our son. Our first summer in the condo, the president's wife went psycho and cut down the tire swing that majority of the owners agreed to let us have for my daughter because she thought it was ugly. Or maybe because we told her teenage son to get off the toddler-sized tire swing. After threatening legal action, the association agreed to let us have the swing so long as it is removable. We hang a birdhouse there when the tire is down and only put it up when the little kids are out to play. The whole ordeal took over a month to settle. I dread this summer when we petition for a swing set. And the next one is a story from a subscriber called Matthew who sent me an email containing this interesting story. And by the way, if you have any interesting stories to share and you don't want to go on Reddit, then you can also write me an email. Just go to my YouTube channel to the About page and there you will find my business email at the bottom of the page. Anyway, the story starts like this. So, I live in a block of units on the main road. It is okay, I live at the back and there is little to no noise, being that we are on the main road. Access to the car park and the block next door is through the third block of units on a side street. They were all built at different times by the same developer over a span of 10 years. Think street numbers 4 to 14, 85 unit block, 16 to 18, my block 20 units, and 20 to 26, 30 units. Access to the car park is available through the side street onto 20 to 26 and the whole car park is secured with a roller door. The car park is open between 16 to 18 and 20 to 26, however, there is a second security door between 4 and 14 and 16 to 18 and my parking spot is 3 spaces from said roller door and has brick walls on 3 sides. So a few weeks ago I came down the side street and tried to turn into the car park where I found a small old Mercedes stopped at the security door. Thinking it was just someone looking for their remote, I just sat there and waited for about 30 seconds before I just decided to use mine and open it. The Mercedes proceeded into the basement and drove down towards the second roller door and stopped in front of my parking spot. I came up behind her before lightly tooting the horn. This was ignored by the driver of the Mercedes. I assessed the situation and decided that if I turned around I would be able to reverse into the spot where the Mercedes stopped as it was, so I proceeded to do the 8-point turn to rotate my car and back it into its spot. The whole time the Mercedes remained stationary, a car length from my door. As I got out of my car, someone from the larger block was exiting, opening the door, so the Mercedes proceeded down into their car park. 2 days later, I went to go out. As I came out of the stairwell and into the car park, I saw the same Mercedes stopped blocking my car in. I got in my car, but the Mercedes remained stationary. This time, however, given the way the driver was stopped, I had no means of getting out without them moving, so once again I gave a short toot to the car to get the driver's attention, but once again this was ignored. After a couple of minutes I got out and knocked on the window, asking the driver to move. However, the driver picked up her phone and ignored my presence. I got back into my car and after another minute or two, someone coming in opened the door and she went on her way. A week later I came home and this Mercedes followed me into the car park. I think, great, she cannot block me this time. I drive in towards my parking spot, angled the car and put it into reverse to back into my spot, only to find the Mercedes so close to my car that I couldn't get into my spot. I hit the horn and get a blank stare from the driver. I get out of my car and walk up to hers, yelling at her, "Move your car so I can park my car, you are blocking my spot." Once again she picks up her phone. This time though I have the power. I walk back to my car, positioned blocking the whole car park, 2 spots for residents in my block and the whole car park for the larger block. I then knock on her window and say, "You have 20 seconds to move so I can park my car, otherwise I will just leave it where it is." Again ignored by the driver, I walk back, take the key out of the ignition and get my shopping out of the boot, lock the car and walk into the stairwell. Now I'm not a complete ass, so I left my shopping in the stairwell and walked around unseen from the upper floor and watched from around the corner. A couple of minutes later, a car came up the ramp from the car park of 4 to 14, the door opens and they come up and stop. They can't go anywhere because a shiny white Golf is blocking the car park exit. The driver honks before getting out and walks towards my car to find it empty. After a few expletives, I walk over and apologize to the driver and explain that I am unable to park while the Mercedes is less than 1 meter off my back bumper. The driver of the other car then storms over to the Mercedes and tells the driver to move it so I can park. He needs to get to work and doesn't have time for this. Like before, she ignores him until he punches the window when she finally decides to move. By this time he has moved his car so the roller door can close behind him. I park my car and the other driver leaves. After talking with the third driver, I advised him that she had done this to me 2 other times. We both conclude that she has no remote and may be parking illegally in the visitor's spot, as she had tailed him in and out several times. He advised he would notify Strata, who manage all 3 unit blocks. The good news, no one has seen the old silver Mercedes in weeks. And ripe stars, unfortunately we have already reached the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed the content. However, if you cannot wait for more ripe content, then I suggest you head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube, where you can find more exclusive Reddit content read by me. Patreon subscriptions start at just $1 per month, and for $1 your name will show up at the end of each of my new videos. However, if you are willing to spend $3 per month, you will get access to more than 50 exclusive Reddit videos, mostly just no mother-in-law stories. However, please understand, I don't want to pressure anyone into spending money, because I am already incredibly grateful that you watch my videos every single day. Thank you so much for your daily support, it really means the world to me, and I hope to see you again tomorrow for the next video.